Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Coast-to-Coast Combat Hour. I'm your host, Matthew Hawkins, along with my co-host, Ed Carbajal, and on a weekly basis, we plan to bring you the biggest news and interviews in the world of combat sports. Ed, how you doing, my man?
Good, improving here in New Jersey. Excited to speak with. I guess we're like co-workers, right? Mike Pendleton. He writes with me over at My MMA News and a bunch of other places. What's up, man?
What's up, guys? Thanks for having me. Yeah, definitely we're coworkers and friends. You just keep saying coworkers. I don't know. Maybe you don't consider me a friend. Who knows?
No, of course we're friends. I just don't remember because I know you write at bjpen.com and Combat Press, and you have your own podcast too. So sometimes I forget, like when I see the other content, that we're connected in that one site.
Yeah, I'm gonna be hopefully working on a few more things here soon as well. So really about to end 2018 hopefully on a high note. So, but yeah, definitely colleagues.
So just so folks, because we do have folks that tune into the video portion of this. Um, Mike's getting over some really bad sunburn, so we're doing him the courtesy of not showing him on camera, but you have that good looking photo to look at for the folks watching.
Yes, I'm a moron. And I said what 98% of people who get their first sunburn ever said. I don't need sunblock. I never burn.
Yeah, I've
Well,
been there and done that a few times. The real moronic part is when you let it happen to you again. So,
Yeah, if it ever happens again, I might as well just never go out in the sun again.
well, wait, Matt, you're in California where the sun shines like longer than most places. How do you not learn your lesson after the first time?
usually it happened. The worst I've ever got burnt was when I went to Hawaii, just doing stupid stuff, have some drinks on the beach, and forget about the forget about the protection. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's definitely hot. You can see I got the Fedor sweater behind me, but I got the Fedor shirt of Glorious Victory on tonight for the
Oh
show.
wow,
So
that's new.
got to be able to adjust to the temperature here.
So Mike, what's up with on your end? I mean, I don't think I read anything from you recently that in keeping up with the news that I was at PFL 6 last Thursday, and then I came back and obviously Bellator happened, and then I had a lot of stuff going on at home. So what do you got anything you're working on?
Well, it should drop this week. I've taken a little break from writing. I tend to do that, just because of my full time job. Hopefully, MMA can become full time job. I'm sure a lot of you understand where I'm coming from with that. But last week we interviewed Mark Montoya and James Krause on the SFLC podcast, which I'm co-host of. That'll come out this week. Obviously, Mark Montoya who I think, I don't know if I'd call him fighter of the year because I don't see him getting a title by the end of 2018, but he's definitely rising star of 2018. Biggest. You can't call him a newcomer because he has had like 9,000 fights in his career, but it's really cool to talk to Mark Montoya. I love what they do down there at Factory X. So that'll be out this week. And then I think tomorrow on the show, we are talking to Dean Thomas ahead of Tyron Woodley and UFC 228. So that'll be fun as well.
Oh, cool. Kraus is on the Lincoln card, right, for this weekend? And
Yes, he is. Warley Alves is his opponent.
did you have anything interesting to say as far as looking at that fight?
Honestly, James Krause, I just call him Fire James Fire Krause Fire because that's all he is. He's so honest and real in all his answers. And I'll just tell you guys this. What James Krause said to me that stood out the most, as it should and would to anyone, is he's like, you know what? I'm okay if I lose this fight. Yeah, I really don't care if I lose this fight. Some people be like, yo, it's like the worst attitude to have. But James Krause has really been open about how much he's enjoyed coaching, how much he's really gotten into the other aspects of MMA. He's obviously down to fight, but he doesn't know how much longer he has in him to fight. So I'm interested to see not only how he comes out at welterweight, because this is a welterweight fight, but how he transitions back to fighter from coaching, because he was and is the main coach for Megan Anderson,
Mm-hmm.
and cornered her against Holly Holm. So it's a fun storyline that's definitely going under the radar this weekend.
He's been working with Anderson for quite a while now. I ran into him at an Invicta event where she fought a couple years ago, and he was working her corner. He's been around a long time. Does he have his own gym now, or is he just the head coach somewhere?
Yes, he does have his own gym. I believe it's, I don't want to say the wrong thing, but I know it's in Kansas City. I believe that's where his gym is at.
That makes
Uh,
sense.
yeah, but I know he travels to and from. Uh, I want to say it's Glory MMA, but I could be wrong. So, but yeah, he travels from Kansas City to Denver. Yeah, it's Glory MMA.
Cool.
So, what was I going to ask you about him? The thing is, oh, well, I had a comment actually, not a question, but he, the thing about it is when as in someone that's up in age himself for the sport of martial arts or fighting, you tend to not your ego tends to fade away, and you just care more about passing knowledge on and the experiences. The whole thing with like you hear it a lot in the jiu-jitsu community. Losses are lessons and things of that nature. So the fact that he's saying he doesn't care if he loses, I mean, most guys that care are usually young and well, if you look at James Gallagher, he got knocked out at Bellator 204 Friday, and then he was on Helwani's show yesterday, and people are giving him a lot of respect because of how he's handling the loss. The way James Krause is looking at it, like, you're going to learn off of those things. No one can stay undefeated forever. So that's an admirable trait.
Yeah, I honestly kind of lost track of his record, but he's on a 4-fight win streak coming into this fight. So he can, and I know a couple of them were before the Ultimate Fighter, and then he actually had a loss in the Ultimate Fighter. I want to say I can't even recall who he lost to. I know maybe Diego Lima. That might have been who it was, but he's on a 4-fight win streak, so another win here, 5 wins in a row. He might be around a little longer than he even expects himself.
Yeah, yeah. The one thing I love, so I talked to James when he was on that, the last time he was on Tough. He actually lost to Jesse Taylor.
Jesse Taylor, who went on to beat Diego Lima
Yeah.
in the final.
So
Okay.
I had asked him, what do you make? Because if you guys remember, he caught a lot of heat for being a guy with a UFC contract, um, and being on Tough. And he was like, okay. It's like, I don't really care, and you have guys who are like, yeah, I don't care. I'm here to knock people out and just take what's mine. Meanwhile, James is like, well, I don't really care. I'm just here to make money and provide for my family. I don't really care about what anyone else says or thinks. Really, James Krause is just a money maker, and he may not be the Colby Covington in selling fights, but he gets money in fights. He gets money, obviously, coaching, and he's going to do what's best for him. I think James Krause is the best example of of a fighter putting themselves first, and helping others at the same time. So it's interesting. That's a really good conversation. So I'd encourage everyone who wants to hear it when it drops this week. I'll put it out there.
Oh yeah, please, and tag us on Twitter and all that stuff too. We'll spread it around for you.
Absolutely.
Hey, I got a question for you. You're in Chicago, right?
Yes, sir.
So, like, what's the MMA space like out in Chicago? I mean, like, what's the last big event that you saw there or that you were interested in as an MMA fan? I'm always curious because, like, Matt's out in California, and it's like all over. Somebody he can't walk outside his house without walking into like a regional show. Sometimes it seems when you talk to him, whereas me, like, I have to go either to South Jersey or all the way to New York when things are around. What's it like for you out there in Chicago?
Honestly, I hate to say this. I'm going to catch a lot of heat, but I just wish Midwest MMA was more on fire. There's really not. I mean, UFC 225 was just here, obviously, in June. PFL was here more recently than that. But really, one of the biggest promotions we have is XFO, and then there's HFC. Um, so those two are probably the biggest two locally, but HFC is Hoosier Fight Club, so you have to travel to
Mm.
Indiana. Um, but XFO is probably the biggest one. They just had their big summer show, the Outdoor War. which I did not attend because it was the same night as 227. But really good fights, man. You know, I, even when 225 was in town, I thought Chicago could have showed up better. And I don't want to blame Dana White because I don't want to be on Dana White's bad side, but I think we really lost an opportunity to show how many real MMA fans in the Midwest there are because we got a bunch of wrestling fanboys that showed up for CM Punk.
Hmm. So, like, being in, if that's the case with your area, how did you get into following MMA and covering the sport? Like, what got you? What bit you to get you interested?
Well, I'm gonna sound like one of those newcomer fanboys, but actually I was living in Jersey at the time. Just got screwed over on a possible job. The only reason I moved out there, and I have always. I know this is a weird part, but it's a very necessary detail. I've always had cable at my house, so the place my friend that I was living with had DirecTV, which means he had a bunch of Fox Sports 2 and all these other channels. And it was late at night, and I was just scrolling through, and I just so happened. You guys will probably all chuckle when I say this. I just so happened to come on FS2 right during the best part of McGregor Seaver. And I'm sitting there watching this. And if anyone who's followed me throughout my time in sports, you know that I like characters. I like flamboyancy. It's just who I like. I
Mm-hmm.
like it. I like it to a certain extent. But I saw Connor knock out Seaver. I was like, wow, that's incredible. And then he jumped out of the cage and started screaming at Aldo. And I was like, you know what? I'm all in. I don't I don't know who this guy is. I don't know anything about this sport. I stayed up
Yeah.
all night that night and I started researching everything I could. The very first live event I watched was UFC 189, and I haven't missed a fight night since.
Oh,
So
were you there at 189?
no, that was
Oh.
that was just the first live event I had ever watched. The first uh, MMA event I think I went to, well, first UFC event I went to was Holly Holm Valentina Shevchenko, um, which was the launch pad of my MMA career, really.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that was the first UFC event I attended.
What do you mind if I ask how old you are?
I'm 26.
26. Was it something where you just weren't exposed to the sport, or something that you just kind of brushed off as a novelty that you just weren't interested? I mean, you said you hadn't really, you weren't completely aware of it. Is it just where you lived and the
Yeah,
access
it's
to it,
where I
or?
lived. I mean, I grew up, and this is a whole nother story, but I grew up really, and I will say on record, I am not a fan now, but I grew up a big Floyd fan, but it still wasn't big in my family. It wasn't big in my household. It was just boxing wasn't big.
Mm.
Um, Again, flamboyancy, that's what I liked. But you know, there's a whole backstory as to why I'm not a big fan of Floyd. Obviously, his arrest history has something really to do with it.
Yeah.
Because I'm that kind of human. But yeah. So for me, guys, what it was is I grew up on football, like Chicago Cubs, Chicago Bears. That those were. I'm not really a. I am a Cubs fan, but not as much as a Yankees fan as I can admit. I'm actually watching the Yankees game right now, but the Bears and football were my first love, and that was what I did. So I played basketball my whole life. I got hurt playing basketball, so I transitioned into sports radio, and NFL was my focus. First, I started off with high school and college football. I was helping with recruiting and doing all that stuff because that stuff was big here. Derrick Rose was from here. Basketball was big here. And then I just found my passion, love in the NFL. I told every job I had when I was younger that I couldn't work Sundays and I couldn't work Monday nights. Like football was my passion. So once once I finally found the UFC, it took over everything.
So you said you did radio in school. Is that how you found yourself doing podcasting and jumped into the media?
Well, I started at 17 when I was a junior in high school. So when I got hurt, people were like, "Hey, you should do broadcasting and stuff. And I was like, yeah, that's kind of dumb. But I literally did the cliche uh, video web chat sports show in my bedroom, right? Like I was that guy. And I did it on really small sites. And then when I was in high school, or when I was still doing that, someone was like, "Hey, you should write for Bleacher Report." Now this is Bleacher Report before
Hmm.
Turner, so I started writing for Bleacher Report. I'm pretty sure you can find my stuff on there still. Um, so I started in high school, and then I went to college for journalism. I ended up realizing I hate that college route. So actually, an ex of mine was like, "Hey, you should really do media school." So, like an idiot, I was living out in Jersey because that's where I went to. I lived in Jersey twice, so
Yeah,
I went
we're all idiots for living in Jersey. I mean, I'm
That's
right,
from
that
here.
that's almost worse than getting sunburnt twice.
right.
Yeah.
But like an idiot, I didn't realize that there was Connecticut School of Broadcasting,
Hmm.
and I moved all the way back home to go to the Illinois School of Broadcasting or Illinois Center of Broadcasting, now the Illinois Media School, and I just went through that program, was offered a job, worked that job until it shut down. Then when it shut down, I moved out to Jersey for the second time, and then that's when I got screwed over and MMA came calling. So it's kind of weird how it all worked out, but I'm happy it all worked out this way. You may appreciate this as a Jersey guy, but my my goal for so long was just to be another Craig Carton. Obviously not the in legal trouble Craig Carton, but I loved his radio presence, and I still try to bring that to my MMA game as well. But you can't do that as much.
Yeah.
Craig Carton was very big on callers. It's one thing I don't. I kind of miss in the MMA world. You don't really get radio shows that have callers, so
Yeah.
I think that's a big fanboy thing too. You don't want to open it up to a bunch of people who don't train or do anything, which is funny because none of us play in the MLB or the NFL, and we all call into sports radio. So
That's true. I not for nothing. I never liked that guy. He hosted that MMA live or whatever it was on Spike, right? Didn't he have that gig for the short time
yeah,
on
I
the
think
show?
he did.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And I couldn't stand it. There were so many other people that should have been the main host there, but I actually blame him for that show failing because he was the front running face, and it's like, why did you put this guy that's not really? I know he's a good broadcaster and he was comfortable with speaking and stuff, but I obviously, like, Luke Thomas was on that, and he's got like 3 shows now. They should have had him host that, but that's gone. I feel like now's the time for something like that to come back. They canceled Inside MMA, and like now the only show you have on TV for MMA is UFC Tonight, but it's UFC focused. So, and I think Access TV has something on too, but I just feel like because of how much the sport has grown from back then to now, I feel like now's the time to bring something like that just covers the entire sport rather than promotion specific shows.
yeah. I don't want to say you're wrong, but what sucks is if you start looking at the ratings, right? Like, I love Bellator, but you see the ratings are really hit and miss recently. And I think this most recent event, 204 on Paramount, they had the lowest ratings of all year. You know, that sucks. We all see the UFC ratings and the pay per view buys and all of that. And this is something that maybe people say, "Oh, you just say that because you like Connor," but I feel like MMA gets bigger when their bigger stars are involved. So with Connor coming back, I think UFC 228 is actually going to do better than expected because you're going to see a Connor promo. You're going to hear about Connor. It's all,
Mm,
like every chance you have a break, they're going to talk about Connor versus Khabib. People are
yeah.
going to tune in because they go, dude, next fight is Connor and Khabib. Meanwhile, they're going to miss about 3 fight nights, but I think pay-per-views do better. So, and if these John Jones rumors are true, and I have no inside information, now you're really gonna start to see pay-per-view buys, and I think, and I agree with you. Hell, all of us broadcasters need some type of job, right?
Yeah.
Let's create more opportunities for us. But this sport's not gonna get anywhere until one, the big superstars stop getting in trouble and stop leaving the UFC, and two, There's a whole broad, there's like 25 reasons, but the superstars need to stay. Can you imagine an NFL season without Tom Brady, Aaron Rodgers, so on and so forth? Yeah,
Yeah.
it'd be brutal. You wouldn't watch it, and that's what's happening with the UFC.
Yeah, I mean, I think the ratings. I think there's a lot more to that because the ratings for UFC are down. As you mentioned too, it's pretty much across the board for all MMA that ratings have dropped, and I'm not sure exactly. I'm no expert on the rating system, but so many people have gone to streaming now. I mean, for instance, me, I know I'm one view, and I don't, I never had a Nielsen box, but I went from Direct TV to Sling TV, so now I still watch the Bellator fights on Paramount, but I don't think I don't know how that works. I don't know anybody that's went to Direct TV now or Sling or YouTube TV or any of those other streaming services. I don't know. I mean, I don't know how many people subscribe to those, but I wonder how that affects the ratings.
Yeah, that's definitely an interesting call there too. I have no idea. I'm ratings illiterate. And I also think, again, I forget what the buys were for UFC 225, but what matters to me. I understand the the base behind ratings, right? But I was there. Like I was at 225. The atmosphere was electric. Everyone looked like a legitimate fight fan, minus the CM Punk fanboy wrestling fans. Um, no disrespect, but I worked a quick story. I worked in the service industry for a while, and I actually worked at a wrestling bar. And the owner, well, manager, told me he would tell me all the time, "Hey, here's what I love about UFC nights. You get actual fight fans who come to the fights that drink, pay money, and eat food. On wrestling nights, you get the guys still living in their mom's basement with Cheeto stains on their hands and shirts that drink soda and water, go overly crazy for something that's already predicted." Listen, I still watch wrestling. Before I joined you guys, I'm watching old school WWE Raws. I still
Yeah,
love
no,
that.
I'm a wrestling fan. I mean, and I'd say wrestling fans are stupid if they don't just pay $9 a month to watch the wrestling and they're going to bars instead.
Right, exactly. But I just find it funny, the difference in the two fans. But for me, it's not maybe because I don't have a hand in the pot, but ratings are what they are. To me, what matters is how are we building these fighters? How are we building the UFC brand? It's I said I wasn't going to dog Dana, but it's just kind of crazy how we can say, or he can sit there and say, the most despicable day in UFC history is Conor throwing a dolly through a bus window. And then as soon as you're ready to make the most money possibly of all time in your reign with the UFC, you're like, hey guys, I know this was like the worst day ever, but let me show you what Conor did. Like,
Yeah,
Yeah.
it hurts the
it's
brand.
it does, and I've said it on the show here a bunch of times, and we don't have UFC credentials yet, so I don't try to badmouth them, but I've been around the sport for a long time. I started watching UFC 5, and I haven't missed an event since. So I'm 23 years in nonstop watching every UFC event that's taken place. I've been to 48 of them now. So there you talk about superstars, they don't create them anymore.
They don't.
They simply don't. There's too many events, so you forget about it. Back in the day, before your time, and you used to be able to go on the radio, and Jim Rome would have on Chuck Liddell, or Jim Rome would have on Chael Sonnen, or Jim Rome would have on Dan Severn, or you could go all the way back to Ken Shamrock. I mean, I remember UFC 6 and 7 being promoted on national radio shows in San Diego and LA, and I don't listen to a lot of them now, but maybe an occasional morning show will have somebody on. But I don't see them in newspaper or not newspaper, but I just don't see them on the magazine shelves as much as I used to. You just don't hear about them. They're not on, I mean, when was the last time anybody was on Sports Center? And ESPN just paid a ton of money. Maybe that'll change now, but I just don't feel like unless it's a UFC branded show that anybody's pushed anywhere. It seems like the promotion is just completely fallen off. You don't see autograph signings anywhere. I mean, there was a time not too long ago that before a pay-per-view, they would have 5 or 6 bars across the country spread out evenly, where you'd have Diego Sanchez fan meet and greet at a Buffalo Wild Wings in Houston, and you would have Chuck Liddell somewhere in LA, and you would have you know Kenny Florian in Boston somewhere. I mean, I just think that that's really taken away from the, gaining the new fans. You talk about going to 225. I was just at 227, and that was one that was considered kind of a weaker card, but the fans were electric. You talked about that at 225. The hardcore fans are as strong and knowledgeable as they've ever been. I just don't think you don't have the casuals anymore. If it's not Ronda Rousey or Conor McGregor fighting, I don't have my family. I don't have my sister calling me to watch fights. I don't have, I couldn't get 3 people to my house to watch a fight nowadays unless it was those guys fight, or, if Ronda were to come back, or Conor. 10 years ago, I would have 30 people in my living room to watch Matt Hughes fight Frank Trigg. And it's just so much different than it's ever been.
You know what's funny that you guys talking about that. It just made me think about the article I submitted today over at My MMA News, where Ray Cooper says, and when I spoke to him, the video's on there too. At the end of the PFL 6 event, he actually said something about comparing the Professional Fighters League to the UFC, and the point he made was how Pro Fight League's format is truer to the sport of MMA, whereas UFC seems to be focused on the entertainment value. But I mean, it looks like that focus is what brings in more money. But if you're like, I don't know if there's like a still like, I guess, honor amongst competitive martial artists that would rather make some money but still fight for the glory of winning a tournament. I don't know. It just made me think about that as you guys were talking about the pros and the cons of how the UFC pushes stars.
It's not only that, guys, but and this goes into my maybe rant about 228. But it's the fighters too, though, right? Because we live in a social media era, and I'm gonna give them credit because I give anyone and everyone who has helped me in this sport and on the media side of things. He hasn't helped me, but this is something that where I've learned, and I don't know. I'll ask you guys first: swearing allowed or no?
You can go ahead.
Okay. So he hasn't helped me physically or right to me, but indirectly, Joe Rogan has been a huge help to me in learning how to really talk to fighters. And I tell this story to everyone. When he first started doing the JRE MMA show or hour, whatever he calls it now, he had Tyron Woodley on right after shoulder surgery. And Tyron Woodley, one of my favorite fighters, who just puts people to sleep, minus, okay, Damian Maya. And, listen, I don't, maybe it's biased, but I didn't have him versus Thompson at 205 a draw. You could, as I did, see where you'd wanted him to give up that guillotine, choke a little sooner, and just finish the fight. But anyways, so, Tyron Woodley, obviously not the most popular guy in the UFC, obviously not the most popular champion. But he was having a conversation with Rogan, and he said, yeah, you know what the people say. And Rogan goes, what people? He goes, you know, the people, you know what they're saying. He goes, and Rogan goes, no, what fucking people? What people are you talking about? Are you talking about fucking internet trolls? He goes, you're the fucking 170-pound champion of the UFC. You're the welterweight champion of the world. You have a belt that solidifies that. Why are you worried about internet trolls? And I can understand fighters going back and forth to try and make fights, and that's all fun. But it's when champions and guys who should be at the top of the game in the UFC or PFL or in Bellator, when they're responding to fans left and right, what do you have to solidify? Like, you have a belt, your record speaks for itself, and I think not only the UFC not getting behind these guys definitely hurts them, but I think these fighters engaging, listen, we all want our favorite athletes to engage with us. But it's like, wow, this guy could easily, or this girl or this fighter can easily be thrown off by some guy probably sitting in his mom's basement with a Snuggie on, just talking trash. Like, that just hurts. I think that hurts as well.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good point because, coming up old school, I was always like a Tito Ortiz fan, but if Tito Ortiz at 23 years old would have had social media, who knows what the hell everybody's opinion would be of the guy. Back then you didn't have that. And I guess, you had you only really knew the person based off their fights. Occasionally, like I said, you'd get a radio interview or something, but you didn't have Tyrone Woodley or back. I can only imagine what Tito Ortiz would have been like on Twitter or any of so many of those guys. What would young Chuck Liddell or young Kevin Randleman or young Mark Coleman, those guys have sounded like on Twitter, you know, when they were at the peak of their careers, and people were talking shit to them. It would have definitely changed people's attitudes towards them. So yeah, I think that you're right in the sense that getting into it with internet trolls is just a waste of time and really doesn't look good on the
Yeah, I
fighter.
mean, it's not even Tyron too. I mean, look at his opponent, Darren Till. You can't go on Darren Till's Twitter without seeing him going back and forth with somebody. And I think, and here's my thing. I think Darren Till's a great fighter. I think 228 is going to be an underrated main event. I think the whole card's going to go, underrated, the casuals won't come out for it. But if I sat, and you guys, I would think you would agree to this. If I sat 100 people in a room who understood fighting is awesome, right? They don't know anything about any martial arts or anything. And I showed them UFC 201 and I told them, hey, this is Robbie Lawler, and I told them his background, or I didn't even use his name. I just said fighter A, this is his background. He's the welterweight champ, one of the best there is. And here's a guy who's been waiting forever for his opportunity. And I didn't put any other like news articles or anything else in there. And I just gave you the fight, 100 people in that room, and you watch what Tyron Woodley did to Robbie Lawler, you'd be like, holy shit, I need to watch this guy more. And that's how it should be. That's, in my opinion, how it should be. But the problem is what we got after that. Like calling out Nick Diaz, George St. Pierre, so on and so forth. That hurt his brand.
Yeah, and I was at the first New York, his first fight with actually I was at all those fights you mentioned, both of the Thompson fights and the Maya fight. And even though he dominated the Maya fight and the first Thompson fight I thought was close and I thought it was a good fight, and the second one was a dud. I think fans just you got to go for it. You get it just to me, I would argue that it looks bad because a guy wins the championship spectacularly and gets to that opportunity by knocking out Koscheck and you know you'd have to help me out who else he knocked out on that run. But I mean, he devastated some people on the run, and then once he got the belt, it was kind of like for fans that have been around a little while, the old Woodley, the Woodley who laid on Paul Daly, the Woodley, he had some early matches where he was kind of a blanket in his Strikeforce days. But you know is it's just so hard because you got the UFC's made it where you got to keep that belt. He's got to keep that belt to make the money that he deserves to make. But at the same time, you don't go to the ground with Damian Maya if you've got to keep that belt.
Right.
Yeah,
Well,
he got a lot of criticism for that fight. I actually wrote something over at Sherdog about it because as people were saying with that fight with Woodley and Maya was boring, but he fought him the smartest way you fight a guy like Damian Maya, and talking about trolling, and he got trolled for that, and I was just like, what? Like you said, it's the guys in the basements and stuff that have something to say that have never felt the pressure of somebody like Damian Maya.
right. Yeah. It's who's never rolled before. And listen, I've just this year picked up training, right? And yeah, look with him coming up this weekend, Justin Gaethje has some of the best leg kicks in the world, and I will never ever, for one, because I'm flat footed, which I thought sucked in basketball. Try throwing a kick on a bag when you're flat footed hurts like hell when you don't do it right. So I'm never one to be like, oh, you can't take leg kicks. Shut up. I can barely throw a leg kick. So it's those guys who have never for me, I'm just training striking right now. But yeah, if you've never rolled before, you wouldn't know just how good Damian Maya is. And this is just all across the board with every fight, with every fighter, with every fight, with every event, with every promotion. Unless you've been there, done that, in a sport that's so new, right? So we all grew up playing basketball, playing baseball, playing football. We have a common general understanding, but
Yeah.
none of us really were getting, armbarred at 13 years old. So, or put to sleep or learning how to throw head kicks, at 16, so, the sport's growing and I hope eventually the casuals will grow out, their intelligence, but it's just crazy. Listen, I love it. Like I said earlier in the show, my number one love was always the NFL. And, there are people who are like, yo, you ready for fantasy football? I'm like, I guess. I'm more worried about Justin Gaethje, James Vick, and UFC 228, but I guess I'll be there. Yo, can you make it to our draft? Probably not. Why not? There's a fight the night before. Oh, okay. Like, so it's just, if you love it, you love it. I think what I love the most is, I didn't have a silver spoon growing up, and I think I like the emotion mental aspect of two people, man and or woman, getting locked in a cage and having to fight for not literally their life, but their earnings, their respect, their place in their job. I just love that whole thing, and that I think comes from the first fighter I ever watched being Conor McGregor. So
Well, you picked a good first event. That 189 was a spectacular event. And you talk about Robbie Lawler. That was the night he fought Roy McDonald. And
Yeah, I was there for that. I was actually in Vegas for that. That was my first. This is the first time I went. For me, I was there for Page Two Sports to cover UFC 189. It's a site that's not around anymore, but yeah, that was it was an amazing week for me. And I went to the fan thing with that was before the sale, so Dana White and everybody was a little friendlier. It was more what like stuff like Matt's accustomed to, not like the way it is now when you go on International Fight Week. It's just a tent and autograph signings.
it used to be so much different. The
Yeah.
fight weeks and the expos and everything was just, it used to be awesome. It used to be worth $50 for the weekend to get in and pay to go. And, that's declined since the new ownership. And,
well, I'll
you know,
tell you
that,
this, guys. Real quick, fun story. And I don't want to come off bragging at all, but so UFC 225, like I said earlier, Holly Holm, Valentina Shevchenko was the first live fight I got to go to. Bellator and Glory have been the only two big promotions that have credentialed me. So I don't know what it's like on the media side of a UFC fight night. Hopefully, I will one day. But so I used the Holly Holm Valentina Shevchenko to really get in with other media members. I didn't really think much about fighters and coaches except for Izzy Martinez. And Izzy Martinez opened me up to some gyms and some coaches. So that was really cool. So I took that lesson learned and I used it at UFC 225 and quickly found out, by doing work with a few guys who were going to be on that card, like Mike Santiago. Oh, hey, this is where the Fighters Hotel is.
Mm-hmm.
So I spent Tuesday through really Saturday working my full-time job, which is retail, and then getting off of work and going to the Fighters Hotel, trying to get in contact with anyone and everyone that I could, trying to schedule interviews, meet coaches, meet fighters,
Yeah.
and listen, I love being a fan of the sport as well, but the experiences, the conversations, the interviews, and just the opportunities I got just being there,
Yeah.
I I wouldn't trade that for the world. And I did go partake in a couple of the UFC fan events right before fight night, but to me it was grinding out there all day long. Even got to meet Bruce Buffer, who I've since interviewed. Like those guys could be like, "Yo, this is the Fighters Hotel. Get the hell out of here."
Yeah.
They could have easily shut down, which you would see a lot of in my time of trying to be a freelance NFL guy. NFL players don't want to be around you. They're
Mm-hmm.
trying to go to the club 3 days before a game. They're not worried about that stuff. So I got to meet a lot of great connections, and I think to me that was my favorite part. When I saw what they did for the fans at 225, I was like, wow, this is massive. When I saw what they did for the fans at UFC 205, I was like, this is insane. Um, but in all the sports that I've ever covered, I still think UFC fighters are the most giving with their time.
Yeah, well, I think fighters in general are pretty giving with their time, especially when you catch them, like you said. I mean, it's they're probably comparing them to other athletes in other sports. They're definitely more willing to have a conversation with you, whether you're media or not. You know, if you watch I cut the tape. If you watch like just this last Thursday when I was in Atlantic City, I talked to Zeffirino after his win about his illness and stuff, and I cut the camera, but we kept talking about jujitsu and stuff after that. Same thing with Jake Shields and the other people I talk to, but like they don't mind giving you their time, if especially if they know that you legitimately are just interested in what they do, because us guys like us, you know, MMA is a big deal to us, but I mean you alluded it to before, Mike. You'll talk to, like you said, you were talking to your fantasy football buddies because they just don't get, like they just don't get it. So as big as it is to us, and I know Matt and I have talked about this on other episodes, it's not where we think it is when we step outside our little MMA circle.
Yeah, like I either need new friends or I need my people to get more involved. Justin Gaethje James Vick's gonna be a great fight. My phone should be blowing up this week. Like, hey man, what are we doing for 228? Nah, especially I think part of it is the area I live in. MMA is just not big, which is crazy because Chicago's such a big area, and it sucks. But I'm okay because I kind of have a little relationship with a neighborhood establishment. It's not too far from me. And I go there to watch all my fights. And, I'm known as the resident MMA guy. I've got guys who like to gamble come up to me, who's going to win this fight? I've made some people some money, just by my knowledge of the sport. And it's, oh man, I want to come here and watch fights because you're fun to watch fights with. Now the person I am when I watch those fights isn't the person when I'm interviewing these guys or doing stuff like this, like totally different side. Until I start getting paid to cover fight nights, I have to stick with this relationship that I have with this place, and I get to be a fan for one night. Not the same way when I'm there, 225. People are like, "You gonna enjoy this night or what?" I'm like, "Nah." I'm watching and working. You know what I mean? So, yeah, it's rising though. I don't want to just crap on it the whole time. I know it's getting there. It goes back to my whole original point. It just sucks that it has to be based off of these big name fighters, right? It has to be based off John coming back, Connor coming back. And what sucks is, guys, we could probably be freaking out for the next 40 plus days going, oh my God, Connor Khabib, can't wait, right? But then, like, you take a step outside of the box and you walk into, like, the biggest mall in your area and you go, Khabib Nurmagomedov. And people are going to be like, God bless you. You're like, yo,
Yeah.
wait, no, like, this is, but you could go into the same mall and be like Josh Rosen. And they're like, oh my God, the rookie quarterback for the Arizona Cardinals. You're like, what?
Yeah.
What?
Well, that's what it. I feel like I'm telling some of the old stories and stuff, but you got to take my word for it. The access to the fighters now is nothing like what it used to be. You used to be able to. I went to UFC 33. Was the first UFC I went to. I went to the weigh-ins. I actually, talk about bragging and stuff. You have to look at some of my stuff because I've got a pretty impressive little run of stuff. Everything from HBO picking me the biggest fan to, but I get on stage. I win a drawing to go on stage with Carmen Electra. I'm up there. They're taking photos of me and Carmen Electra. You come down and they got a table set up. You got Randy Couture, Carlos Newton, Tito Ortiz, Vladimir Matyshenko, I think BJ Penn. I mean, these guys have a table set up signing autographs and taking photos with every fan at the weigh-in. You go the it just you used to be able, the smaller events. You used to go to a small event and you'd see, here in Southern California, and I would see Dan Henderson, Boss Rutan, Marco Huas, Pedro Hizzo, and they would just be sitting in the crowd watching fights with you. It was just I don't know if it's the money now, and obviously I'm not trying to bag on it because so many fighters are gracious, and I still run into people left and right, and love the interaction. But it's just it. You talk about 205. 205 was nothing compared to even like UFC like 43. I mean the not the hype wise and not the show, but just the access for the fans. And I don't know. I don't know what exactly it is. You talk about friends having, you need a new group of friends. Like I said, 10, 15 years ago, I'd have 40 people at my house. I'd have 40 people at my house to watch Giant Silva fight Manoa Man in Pride. I mean, it was just such a different, people were, I think it was because there was less events. And I think people got to talk about fighters for a longer period of time. You remembered Carlos Newton. You remembered Pat Miletich. You remembered BJ Penn. You remembered early GSP. You remembered Don Fry going back in the day. You remembered, Oleg Tektarov. Even though some of those guys weren't the greatest fighters in the world, people got to talk about them for months waiting for their next fight. Now, after this Gaethje fight this weekend, most people won't. A casual fan won't talk about Justin Gaethje for probably another 4 months.
Yeah, but and you're right. You're definitely right for sure. But you know what I think sucks too is I don't know if it's you know just too many events because I like all the events because I think the events help build the divisions. They help build the awareness of you've got great Brazilian fighters, you've got great Russian fighters, you've got so on and so forth. And for me, like I'm just looking around, I see your setup there, Matt, and I have a similar setup except I don't have mine framed because I'm cheap and I'm poor. But how many
That's
like
why I'm in my kitchen.
right? How many of us or if we really look at it, right? If we go all the way down the line from and maybe I'll run through it real quick just to plead my case here. But Rose Namajunas, she's not really that popular, right? She's not. Amanda Nunes, not really that popular. And so, and obviously Nico Montano, definitely not popular. But even her top challenger. Now, I'm saying this in a sense of the fine line of casual and hardcore.
Yeah, yeah.
Not really popular. Valentina Shevchenko, not really popular. DC, popular. And he takes up two divisions. So Robert Whitaker, not really popular. Tyron Woodley, not really popular. McGregor, or I'm sorry, when he's obviously he's the guy that everyone still thinks is the champion.
Yeah.
Khabib is not really popular to the casual eye. Max Holloway, unless you've seen Den of Thieves, TJ Dillashaw, very popular, I think, and that goes back to his olden days as well. Henry Cejudo, definitely not that popular. So I think I just ran down all the champions, and I hope I didn't miss any, but the champions just aren't that popular, and why is it? You
I
know,
like I said, I don't think people know who they are. There's the events. I mean, you've got somebody like Cejudo. Was his last fight even on a main card? I mean, he probably was, and I don't mean. Yeah, I think he fought Benavidez on a main card of. It might have even been two. I don't remember exactly what event, but actually, I think it was a prelim fight. I just it seems to me that you know they don't. There's so many events, and don't get me wrong, I love the events. I used to order. I have more VHS tapes in Portuguese and Russian just so I could watch as many fights as possible from the early to mid '90s. I mean, I've got hundreds and hundreds of tapes and DVDs and stuff. So I mean, I'm a vacuum for trying to get as much information as I can, but it just seems to me the normal fan, the average fan, I would say I probably could call every one of my friends and maybe one or two of them would know who Darren Till is.
right? And
You
I become like I'm kind of a sick bastard, right? So I'm the guy who, listen, I don't appreciate what Darren Till said. I have a pregnant girlfriend. I don't really care. I have a
Yeah.
daughter I haven't seen. I
Yeah.
don't really
He
care.
tried to backtrack on that too not that long
My
ago.
thing is like, if you played that in front of any sports fan, they're like, "Wow, this guy's a moron." You're like, "Hey, did you ever root for O.J. Simpson? Because that's actually a moron." So it's like
Yeah.
for me, I understood what Darren Till was saying, and I think maybe I'm not making excuses, but maybe the process and language where you may be able to get away with saying that in the UK, and obviously here in America, we frown upon anything like that. I understood what Darren Till was saying, and I'm not excusing him at all, but that's the fighter mindset, and
Yeah,
and
I don't think first of all many people other than the hardcore fans and stuff on Twitter you're even aware of that. I mean, most of the people that are already in the pay-per-view won't be aware of that. It's just weird to me that at a time when there's more access to UFC than there's ever been before, you named all those champions. I'll go even further and say name a champion in the last 6 years other than Conor McGregor and Ronda Rousey. If you took every one of those champions and you showed up at a Buffalo Wild Wings and I put them at tables, and then I took Dan Henderson or Chuck Liddell and put them at a table 100 yards away, there would be 10 times more people walking up to Chuck Liddell and Dan Henderson than any of the UFC champions of the last half decade.
Well, sir, does this include interim champions? Because Kobe Covington might give them a run for their money.
I mean, it's so weird to me how it's become that. And I mean, I see it with, even if you go to an event and they show everybody on the screen, they'll show Tyrone Woodley and he'll get half crowd booing. They'll show Robbie Lawler and he'll get a nice crowd. You know, they'll show Cowboy Cerrone and he'll get a nice thing. And then they'll show Dan Henderson, and all of a sudden the crowd will erupt like it's Conor McGregor walking out for a 205 fight. You know, it's just it's so weird to me that, with, like I said, with all the access and now with social media, and you know, that they can't. And maybe those guys are, like I said, are famous because not everybody knows everything about them, other than that they just kick ass in a cage. You know, but it's just weird to me that the UFC can't. And I feel bad because the show's kind of turned into a little bit of a bash session, but I just can't. I can't figure out why none of these people, why they can't develop these guys. And my only reason I can figure is because there's just so many fights that fans are looking forward to the next one a week later, and they can't attach on to somebody. And I mean, I don't know. That's all I can come up with.
You know, I think we're actually getting to something, and it's not just bashing the UFC. Let's just use the two biggest ones, right? And I hate to say it because I do think he's the greatest fighter of all time in John Jones, but let's look at Conor and Ronda, because they really transcended the entertainment side of this. I believe. You guys could correct me if I'm wrong. I believe those two made it more entertainment than fighting. And they're great fighters, amazing fighters. But we got to learn so much about them away from the cage, right? We saw Ronda in movies. We got books. We got interview upon interview upon interview. And then with Conor, you know, yeah, his movie only came out last year, but we got a movie already out of him. You know, we had his story told to us so many times, and maybe that's where the problem of too many events comes in, where we can't tell the story of Justin Gaethje. We can't tell the story of TJ Dillashaw. You know, all people knew about 227 was, hey, these two used to be teammates, they don't really like each other anymore. Things went bad.
Well, I think that story. Yeah, no, you're right. You're right about the story, and that's the thing. Actually, again, like Cooper said at last week at the end of PFL 6, the UFC does focus on the entertainment side of it more. And given that they were bought by that Endeavor, WME-IMG, they're called Endeavor now. I mean, they're like a modeling agency. Obviously, they have the formula or the capital to push certain people that are marketable. You know, it's not like I forget who we had on, Matt, when we were talking about how wins versus trash talk bring in fans, because like look at Fedor has a following, but still there's not that many people. There's still a lot of people that don't know how good or how long Fedor has been in the sport versus people that know, like like Conor McGregor, because he markets himself. So the wins can market a fighter, but not as good as the fighter can market himself by being outspoken and comical or what have you. So I think that's where the problem lies. Like guys like us, or the older guys like me and Matt, because I know, Mike, you said that you like the outspoken trash talky types, right?
Yeah. To a point, though. I'm not. Listen, I don't want to throw business out there, but I'm not all in on Colby Covington's shtick, but having met Colby Covington behind the scenes, that's not Colby. It's not Colby Covington.
Well, he's got a pro wrestling background too, doesn't he? Didn't he do like indie?
A little bit. Yeah, he did a little bit of stuff.
Yeah, he did. So yeah, no, I definitely like it. But hey guys, who's a really good example for it? And I hate to cut you off, but like, look at Dustin Poirier. He's becoming more vocal. He's being way more active on social media, and we're like, damn, this is a guy who just gives everything to his fights, and then turns around and gives everything from his fight, like his whole fight kit, to local charities. He's winning all his fights. He's smoking people, and people now we forget the guy fought at 145 and Conor cleaned him. We forgot about that. So I think when fighters start to tell their story more and they're given a platform to tell their story, we're going to see more superstars created.
He's also winning though. Like he's got a lot of wins recently since he lost to Conor too. So that's why I'm just playing devil's advocate. I'm not really trying to counter your point, but
no,
you know what I mean. Like the wins do count for something. So obviously he's using his platform, but he's also winning. So he's not known as a trash talker, but his skills set is obviously. There been people talking about him this week, or what if Connor fought him now? It's not the same guy that he fought. You know what I mean? So I think the skill and the in cage performance counts for something.
And I think, the other thing is, like you said, he's been winning fights, but he's kind of been front and center on a lot of his fights. I mean, he fought, I think the Connor fight, if I remember, was 178, and that was a main card pay per view. And then, I can't remember every one of his fights, but, he fought Alvarez on a main card, and then he headlined with Alvarez,
Yeah.
and he fought Gagey in a main event. That's to me how you kind of build people up, and that's where you got guys like Poirier now who have gained the recognition they deserve. You mentioned Cody Garbrandt, and Cody Garbrandt has a bit of a name, and he headlined against Thomas Almeida and Dominic Cruz. But even going into those, like, his first main event was against Thomas Almeida. Before then, I don't even think he had a main card fight in the UFC. So going into that fight, nobody knew who he was. I just feel like you got to kind of, and Poirier's been around a while. I don't know how you solve it, because not everybody can be on a main card and not everybody can be front and center. But I really think that having guys just buried on undercards of Fight Night Pass, it kind of like Till. I mean, Till fought Wonder Boy, like I said, on Fight Pass, and not a lot of people watch Fight Pass. I don't, other than 2 or 3 people. I don't know any people who even subscribe to it. So I just feel like, and I feel like they did that. I think they've done that with Gustafsson a little bit too. Although Gustafsson's a huge name, and as far as most fans go, it seems like his Manua fight and some other fights just kind of got buried on Fight Pass. And I mean, a lot of people wouldn't even remember that he's fought. He fought Glover 2 years ago. I think he was even off some time before that. So they're talking about him fighting John Jones now. I just don't know if you have the same fan base from 3 or 4 years ago that knew Gustafsson as the killer that fought Jones, as opposed to the guy who could potentially be fighting him again in a couple months if Jones gets his way.
Yeah, no, it's definitely interesting. And you mentioned Cody too. But you know how Cody, obviously Tough helped him out, but we heard everything about Cody. When Dominic started saying, "Oh, I'm sure you who your daddy is," then we started to hear about Cody's backstory and why that affected him so much. And again, I hate to say it's the outspoken ones that become superstars, but it is sports entertainment, unfortunately. The only thing that really, and hopefully, we've started to grow a little intelligence during this tonight. The only thing is just don't take away from the martial arts form. You bring up Darren Till. What sucks to me is, Cowboy Cerrone admitted, "Hey man, when I was offered the fight, I was just like, yeah, whatever, cool. But I don't know who this guy is. Let me go fight him." And little did he know he was the opening to Darren Till's title shot.
Yeah.
That was his launching pad, was the Cerrone finish.
Yeah.
But there are people who are going to be like, "Oh, God, Connor could throw a dolly through a minivan that my mom's driving, and I would still love him." Like, but don't take away what I just watched it. Bloody Elbow put it out there. Faraz Zahabi talking about the fight between him and Khabib. And, the way he broke it down, that's why I'll give him a shout out. He's one of my favorite guys in the world in MMA media, Robin Black. He just
Yeah.
martial arts in such a beautiful way. Just don't lose sight of it. Like, we all love sports, right? We all love entertainment. We all love sports. Like, that should draw us to it all the way. But I hate to say this because I feel like I could get buried for saying this, but it's almost like wrestling, right? Like I told you guys before I watched it, or before I came on here tonight, I was watching old school Monday Night Raws, because there was so much entertainment in there. Now the entertainment is starting to go away, and you're starting to see the people who are getting sick of the WWE go to New Japan. And because that's true wrestling.
Yeah.
So just I can't really say this to fighters because fighters don't do it, but I just ask the fans, don't get away from the aspect of the martial arts sport, because Khabib and Connor is going to be a great fight. But don't let the reason you spend $60 or you get 40 buddies over or you go to a bar with 10 friends is because that's the crazy Irish guy who fought Mayweather that threw a dolly through a bum. Because then you're taking away all the fights that we know about. Fighting Max Holloway in his youth, fighting Dustin Poirier, knocking Jose Aldo out in 13 seconds, demolishing Eddie Alvarez in a way no one really has. And
Yeah.
what's next? Don't take away from the sport. That's my whole plea.
No, and I think it's the three of our passion for the sport is the reason why we're so, at least I'm a bit critical of it, and we made some comments about things we'd like to see changed. I mean, for me, I'd love to see the sport be the biggest sport in the world. I'd love to see billboard after billboard driving down the highway of Rose Namajunas, and I mean, there's so many characters and so many good people in the sport that, and like you said, the martial arts aspect, it's such an important core of the sport that it was brought up on it. It's just it saddens me, I guess, to see the, like you said, the ratings go down, and not being able to get the talk with other my friends and stuff like that. And I still have a core group is really into it, but it would just be really cool to have that time again where we had some really big names and everybody was gathered up. And, I mean, people bash Lesnar for coming back, but if Lesnar comes back and 2 million people watch him and Cormier fight, then I'm all for it. I mean, he's an old school style of pride kind of fighter. And he's a former UFC champion. So, that's, I don't know, but you do make a good point about wrestling in New Japan. That's a pretty good analogy to make. I mean, like I said, I watch wrestling, and I actually bought some New Japan tickets that I'll be going to an event in a couple months here. So it's one of those things where if you're kind of nostalgic, you just you want it to be like how you always remembered it. And I hope I I hope that like this weekend coming up, hopefully Gagey and Vic just lights the world on fire, and it leads into a huge fall coming up here for the MMA world.
Yeah, the UFC has a huge, massive schedule, and I'm gonna tell you guys this: I love Conor to death, right? But I'm gonna captain someone as the ambassador of the UFC right now. And as much as of a John Jones fan I am, if I had to put anyone, a casual, a never be seen MMA before person, whatever I had to do, I would show them Daniel Cormier. I would
Yeah,
show them Daniel Cormier, the coach, Daniel Cormier, the person, Daniel Cormier, the broadcaster, and Daniel Cormier, the fighter. There is truly no better captain or ambassador of the UFC and MMA than Daniel Cormier.
I
No,
agree
Just
with
I
like
that.
I I third that. I mean, to me, you shouldn't be able to go anywhere without seeing Daniel Cormier's face somewhere. To me, he should you know he should be plastered across every single medium the UFC has. His face should be on their website. His face should be on their Twitter account. He should be doing radio interviews 5 days a week.
he really
Promoting
should
the
be.
sport. And
Yeah,
you know
he's also. I mean, when you look at it, he represented the U.S. in the Olympics, and just his whole things outside of MMA, coaching wrestling for kids and stuff like that. I mean, he's just that's the guy that should be on the Wheaties box. That's the guy you want to be your champion. So I agree with that 100%. That's a good that's a good call for an ambassador for the sport, not just the UFC, Mike. I like that you said that. Is there anything you want to plug before we close things out here?
No, I just want to say thank you guys. We kind of turned this into a ramble, and I hope more than just previewing or reviewing Bellator and PFL or looking ahead to UFC Lincoln. Hopefully, this is like a martial arts hour. I love this conversation. I think it's the best way to really go about some conversations with the sport. I think it was very Robin Black esque of me to take this conversation the way I did tonight because he visited me, and I was like, wait, I thought we were going to talk about this, and that, and we just ended up talking about martial arts. But no, guys. Like I said, tomorrow I think I'll be talking to Dean Thomas and a couple other people, ahead of UFC 228. Other than that, I might have a couple things in the works. Um, brain's a little scattered when your whole body is fried, but I'm definitely I'm looking to really do a lot of things. I know in October I'll be doing a podcast here in Chicago that hasn't really done much UFC before. So they
Mm.
want to have me on to talk Khabib and Connor. So I will say this to you guys and to your listeners. And I want to thank you guys for having me on. But um, the day after UFC 228, I am in full Connor Khabib mode. And I know we'll have a few events before then, but I will be just going all in on this fight because I think and I'm not just saying this in no disrespect to guys like yourself, Matt, who have been watching this for years and years and years, and we will use this same term 5 years from now. But I truly do believe this is one of the biggest fights in MMA history, and it's a shame that it's being promoted by a dolly being thrown at a bus.
No, I completely agree with that. I mean, it's a huge fight. It's 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 a great fight. It's the fight that needs to be made right now, and it's the biggest fight that can be made right now. So it's really cool that it happens, and hopefully it does happen. Cross
Yeah,
everything.
don't even say that. Don't
You
say
know.
that. I don't want to think
Um,
about it.
so I know we're wrapping up quick here. I'm gonna have I can't let you go though without getting a couple of your picks for some fights. You
Yep,
mentioned
no,
that Connor fight. You're a big Connor fan. I'm actually a huge Khabib fan. I think Khabib's gonna beat him. Who do you have in that fight?
I have Connor second round TKO.
Second round TKO. How about this weekend's Justin Gaethje James Vick fight?
For his sake and his career, I want to go Justin Gaethje, but I think James Vick flies under the radar as he's been in the UFC. So I'm taking James Vick. Fourth round knockout.
I think it's going to be a great fight. And then one. How about you, Ed? What's your opinion on that one?
You know what? That one is. I mean, I side with Mike in saying like because I've watched Gaethje fight all through the World Series of Fighting and when he transitioned to the UFC and I remember I was one of the few people that knew he was going to win that fight against Michael Johnson. But however, I got to say he maybe have become a little predictable. Everyone knows to check, or well, most people seem to know, but they don't seem to be doing it to check those leg kicks that he throws. And something tells me if you check them, it's still going to hurt the checker more than the person throwing the kick. Because something tells me Gaethje's shins are pretty well conditioned the way he throws those leg kicks. But so I mean, I honestly think it's a coin toss. I want Gaethje to win, but you know, he's taken a few TKOs that he takes a he's been taking a lot of damage to his head, and I think it's starting to wear on him. So, yeah, it's a coin toss to me. I want Gaethje, but I'm not going to be surprised if Vic wins.
I'm kind of following the same boat there. I think if Vic uses his smarts a little bit and keeps the fight in kind of his world, I think he wins. If he gets into a slugfest and a who's tougher than who, I think Gagey will blast him and finish him by the third round. If it just becomes a tough man contest. And then we're actually a pretty pro Bellator podcast here. So I always ask any of our guests where they see the heavyweight Grand Prix going when we got Fedor and Chael and Bader and Mitrione. How do you see that tournament wrapping up?
I think the odds-on favorite is Bader, and that would likely have to be my pick. And I don't know where you guys stand, but I think Chael actually. I don't know if it's an upset, but I like Chael to beat Fedor. Um, but I think just Ryan Bader, he's just the perfect guy for that Grand Prix. And I was here for the Fedor and Mir fight, and it was electric. But I would definitely have to say Bader. And since you guys are pro Bellator, I love Bellator. Huge shout out to Bellator for giving me my real big opportunity with MMA media. I just want to say this, guys, if I may, like, yeah, James Gallagher definitely didn't do himself any favors by the way he acted pre-fight. But I really encourage everyone, and Ariel Hawani I can call him a friend. Go listen to that interview, and I think in 5 years, whether it's in Bellator or if it's in the UFC, we're gonna go back and we're gonna see the effects. And this is not me writing Connor, but we're gonna see the effects of a young guy training with a guy who went from, to use his quote, from nothing to something to everything. The way James Gallagher has reacted since his knockout loss, which you never say someone deserves a loss, but when you come in nonchalant, it happens. Look at Luke Rockhold against Michael Bisping. I think James Gallagher had the most humbling moment of his career that's only going to make him better. And we said it about Aaron Pico when he lost. I'm saying it about James Gallagher now. And Bellator is the perfect stage to pick yourself up off the mat and really rebuild your brand. So laugh at James Gallagher if you want, but the kid's not going away. And he could possibly be a future champion in any promotion. but Bellator has a good problem on their hands.
Yeah.
No, he's definitely talented, and like you said, Bellator's the right promotion for him to be in right now. I feel like if he was in UFC, the UFC would be giving him Jose Aldo this weekend. You know,
Well,
he's gonna be given a chance in Bellator to rebuild his name, rebuild
yeah.
his highlight reel, and the sport, you're humbled. Everybody in this sport is humbled, and it's about how you bounce back. And
And
um,
and that's the thing with martial arts. It's you don't take a loss as something to stop you from moving forward. It's always a lesson, and that's how you always move forward. I mean, you know, when I talk to people, the few classes that I get to teach jujitsu lately, when I do talk to guys coming up, I let them know I didn't get my black belt because no one I've never been beaten. It's because I felt everything. I felt all. I've been arm barred, I've been heel hooked and knee barred and choked and unconscious and Lord knows what else I've tapped to, but I've tapped to everything, so I know what they feel like, and that's part of why I was able to continue and move forward. So that's something when you see a young man like James Gallagher or even Aljamain Sterling when he got knocked out by Marlon Moraes, the way that those guys at such a young age handled the loss and just strapped their training gear on and went back to work. That's what makes a true martial artist. So those guys are the future. Guys like James Gallagher are the future. I interviewed Gallagher when he was here in New York for Bellator 180 when they came to NYC, and it's on the YouTube channel, actually. I mean, the positive attitude that he has, to have it in such a young man like that, it's not all ego. It's a lesson that he's learning, and even I'm not a big Connor fan like you are. I don't hate him either, though. But there's something to be said by trying to keep positive energy even when all the chips are down. So that's what martial arts is about. So that's a good statement you made about them.
all right, Mike. Well, thanks for joining us. Other than picking Chael Sonnen to beat Fedor, I think everything you said was pretty good. So, no, but yeah, we pretty much agree on Bader on that, though. We both stated that. So, and then I think the Fedor Chael fight's going to be fun. It's going to be kind of a good chance for Bellator to have a couple bigger name guys. And
if Fedor loses, you're gonna see Matt go silent on everything. He's gonna cancel that week the podcast and not show up.
yeah,
Yeah.
Hey, I'll do the same thing if Connor loses. So Khabib, don't worry.
yeah. We'll leave it at that. But thanks for joining us, Mike. Again, everybody can follow us on the Twitter at Combat Hour. Can follow myself at MMA Hawk 21, and you can follow Ed at Carbazel. Mike, do you want to throw your Twitter handle out or your Instagram handle out?
I'm at MP23ton on Twitter.
All right, everybody. Thanks for listening and good conversation. I'm glad we didn't have too much of a structured plan and we just kind of flowed. It was good talk.
Yeah, cool. Thanks, man.
Thanks, guys.